Well, I have been working for the Insurance Supervisory Authority until 1997, and I am working for the Guarantee Fund as of 1997. But the Spanish Guarantee Fund is something more than the Spanish Guarantee Fund. We are the insurers of natural catastrophes, terrorism, and we are also liquidating insurance undertakings, because the Consorcio is also, excuse me, is also the IGS, the Insurance Guarantee Scheme in Spain. So, first of all, I want to thank the organizers for inviting me to be here with you. One of my priorities in life was to visit Romania, and thanks to Exprim, I am in Romania, and I paid a visit to Bucharest and now to Sinaia. It is very important for me to be true. And secondly, I would like to also apologize for my English. I am not a bilingual speaker. I don't use my English on a daily basis. And here are some friends, such as Marius, Haik, or Sorin, who know how difficult for me and how uncomfortable for me is to treat these things in English, because I deal with domestic issues and I don't use my English frequently. So I will make silly slip-ups, and I must apologize beforehand. My aim is to explain what the position of the Spanish market is relating to the process of refit valuation of the motor insurance directive. And since I am not going to give a general overview, because Daniela beforehand told me that I should be short, so I chose 4 items: the scope of MTPL insurance, the protection of victims in case of insolvencies, the minimum amounts of cover, and the portability of claims history statements. And my idea is to tell you what is the position of the Spanish market. And I think that I can speak on behalf of the Spanish market and the Spanish institutions, because there is something that is really peculiar in the Spanish insurance industry. There are a number of institutions, and we work closely together, very closely. The Bureau, which is a private institution, the Guarantee Fund, that is entirely public. We are attached to the Ministry of Economy, the Association of Insurance Undertakings, UNESPA, and every institution we are working very closely on a daily basis. And that is the reason why we reached a very important agreement in order to stabilize the motor insurance market. The baremo, the legal scale for the assessment of bodily injuries, is a major agreement that came up from the market, and the insurance supervisor and the Guarantee Fund and the insurance industry, we were all together, and we reached an agreement after a number of years in order to set up this compulsory legal baremo. Secondly, we have agreements between the Guarantee Fund, insurance undertakings, and hospitals that assist people who have been injured in car accidents and road traffic accidents. This is a very important agreement as well, and we have agreements also in order to handle and assess and speed up the handling of material damages as well. So we are used to be, let's say, in the same boat. So I think that, albeit I belong to the public sector, I can speak on behalf of the whole industry, the supervisor, the Guarantee Fund, and the Bureau, and the insurance undertakings. Well, how about scope of compulsory insurance cover? Our view is that for reasons of legal certainty, the MID should clarify and delimitate its scope. So this is a very good reason for reviewing the motor insurance directive, the codified directive, because there have been a number of rulings in the European Court of Justice, the famous Vnuk, Andrade, Torreiro, and Juliana prejudicial cases, and there has been a lot of debate, and there are very different solutions in each market. So the time is, we reached the time for codifying these rulings into a revised, reviewed motor insurance directive. Which is the view of the Spanish market? Well, as far as the definition of vehicle is concerned, we follow the Advocate General Bobek opinion in the Juliana case. I don't know whether you are aware of this prejudicial case, Juliana case, an accident, a road traffic accident that occurred in Portugal, but my suggestion, my recommendation is, in this case, not only to implement and to put in force your legal baremo, I encouraged you before, but to read carefully not only the ruling from the Court of Justice, but the Advocate General Bobek opinion, which is very accurate, is very in line of the ideas we all have about protection of victims in the European Union. So, following this definition or following the reasonings of Advocate General Bobek, we think that the definition of vehicle has to be objective and stable. It has to be limited to vehicles intended to travel and refer to the objective purpose of the vehicle. It has not to be referred to the subjective purpose of the owner or of the driver, because that would lead to uncertainty. So, what types of vehicles that should be intended for travel should be under the scope of the directive? Well, it is our view that MID should be focused on authorized vehicles covered by the regulations of the European Union. So, in principle, I could say that the European Parliament's approach could be a good approach. Those vehicles that are authorized, according to the regulations, to be placed on public roads should be the focus of the Motor Insurance Directive. Motor Insurance Directive should also be applicable for driverless cars. In principle, for the near future, the next future, we think that MID would be a good first solution, regardless the final burden of the responsibility. It seems logical that the insurer of the driverless car should be responsible for paying to the victim. But very light electric vehicles, it is a debate within the market, and the majority of opinions are in favor of leaving this outside the scope of the MID. That would be not the European Commission's approach, that would be the European Parliament's approach. As you are aware, the European Commission says that there is no concerns, there should be no concerns about these vehicles, because if a country, if a member state thinks that it should be under the scope of the directive, they can implement the directive thusly. But if a member state is not in favor of including these under the scope of MTPL insurance, we could include these vehicles in the list of exempted vehicles. This is not a a good solution in the view of the Spanish market because, as you already know, accepted vehicles, when they cause accidents, those accidents would be compensated by the insurance MTPL guarantee fund. And it is our view that normal drivers of vehicles, of cars, trucks, should not pay the consequences of these kind of accidents that are quite difficult to document many times. As regards to the definition of use of vehicles, judgments in the VNUC, Andrade and Torreiro, prejudicial cases are the relevant ones. So to sum up, we could say that the MID should cover the uses of the vehicles that are consistent with the normal use as a means of transport, that is the VNUC ruling. And this is something that has been stressed by the Spanish market. We would like to include that this is the normal use as a means of transport at the very time of the accident, because vehicles may have different uses, and we have to bear in mind what is the use of the vehicle at the very time of the accident that has taken place. Secondly, that is irrespective of the specific place it is being used. This is what the Torreiro ruling states. The Torreiro case was placed in Spain. It was a military vehicle that had an accident, and a member of the Spanish army was injured. And according to the Spanish law, MID principles should not be used in specific terrains that are not for public access. So the Torreiro ruling is not in line of the Spanish legislation. Even this is true, the Spanish market is nowadays aligned with this ruling, and we think that the MID should cover both public roads, private roads, and also grounds that are not easily accessible for the public, for the fully comprehensive protection of victims of road traffic accidents. And excluding cases where the principal use at the time of the accident is something other as a means of transport. In the case of in the Andrade case, the accident was produced by a vehicle, a tractor, that was stationary, and it was used only as machinery. So this is the position of the Spanish market, which is totally in line with these three rulings. Additional clear exclusions should be plainly stated in the Motor Insurance Directive according to the Spanish market. First of all, motorsport competitions. There are sometimes competitions in which the collisions between motor vehicles is one of the goals of the competition. So we don't see clearly that this is the kind of accidents that should be protected by the MID. And well, here we come to something that has been mentioned by Marius, and it is very important, although Marius forgot a terrorist attack with a vehicle which was in Barcelona. I think it was 2016 in August. I remember it was in August because I was spending my summer holidays and I had to stop my summer holidays. And well, vehicles as an instrument for committing terrorist attacks, it is our opinion that they should be excluded from the MID. In Spain, we have a terrorist scheme for compensation of victims, and it is our view that we should address terrorist attacks by means of specific schemes. We don't really see why a terrorist attack committed by means of a vehicle should have a different compensation or a different scheme from a specific terrorist attack using a bomb or using a knife. This is not what we mean by use of vehicle. This is, the use of a vehicle is totally secondary. It is the principal aspect is that we are suffering a terrorist deed. It is the same with violent crimes. So nowadays the Spanish legislation approaches terrorist attacks by means of a specific scheme for the compensation of victims of terrorist attacks, but not making any difference as whether it is by means of a vehicle or by a bomb. The scope of the obligation to insure in order to close the circle relating to the scope of the directive. Well, in this case, we have to focus our mind on the Juliana case and the ruling, as I told before, of the Court of Justice and the opinions of the Advocate General. 4th September 2018, I recommend, I highly recommend to read this judgment, but especially, as I told you before, the opinion of the Advocate General, 26th April 2018. I love water when it doesn't cause floods. Yes. Well, the activity a vehicle is used for at any given time will vary, as Advocate General Bobek states, but that cannot be the case for the general obligation to insure, which requires a clear beginning and a clear end in time. So the starting point for determining the existence of an obligation to insure is, and we fully agree with with Advocate General, is the vehicle is intended to travel on land and can indeed do so. So the fact that the vehicle might generally be stationary for extended periods and the risk might be minimal, a reason for a difference in premiums, but not for excluding the duty to insure. There have been a number of projects in the Spanish market in order to be very innovative, whereby the cover of MTPL insurance can be interrupted by the owner or by the driver of the vehicle by means of an application, and with a click you put in force the coverage, and with another click in the application in your mobile phone you can stop the coverage because you are leaving stationary your vehicle, or because you are not using the vehicle, for instance, as the specific reason for coverage included in the policy. Well, the fact that the owner is not using the vehicle for travel and does not intend to do so does not prevent it from being a vehicle in the sense of the directive. And therefore, it has to be insured, whether stationary or not, whether you are using it for the transport of some goods or if you are not using it at all. So there has been a ruling from the Insurance Supervisory Authority stating that the whole market should follow the scope of the Juliana case, and therefore I would say that the main conclusion we do support as Guarantee Fund is that we have to be careful with innovations. We love innovations in the motor car insurance side, but on the voluntary covers, casco, limits exceeding the MTPL compulsory cover, but not as far as compulsory MTPL insurance is concerned. So The cover should last while the vehicle is roadworthy. Protection of victims where MTPL insurers are insolvent. This is the second aspect and the main topic included in the refit valuation according to the Spanish market. This is the main topic, and this is this sole reason would justify the valuation process and the implementation of some amendments in the directive, because there are three circumstances that may leave a victim unprotected, even if compulsory insurance legal rules are in place. Uninsured driving, number one. Hit and run cases, number two. These two cases are included in the MID, but there is a third one, invalid insurance due to insolvency, and there is no legal provisions at all in the motor insurance directive. So this is a major issue, and it is needed to complement the protection of victims by means of the directive. Insolvencies do exist. We have seen it in the other presentations. In the case of Spain, we have no domestic MTPL insolvencies up till now. But we have had consequences in the FOS business. Ineas from the Netherlands. Ineas had no business at all in the Netherlands. They carried out business in Spain, in France, and in Germany. So how easy it is for the supervisor of the Netherlands to grant a license if they know that Ineas is not going to cause any problem at all in the home country. It is the same with Alpha and Kudos from Denmark, which are supposed to be very mature markets from the north. Well, from the point of view of southern countries, we rely on these markets, and sometimes we should have some doubts about the soundness of some of these undertakings. They are causing nowadays problems in Spain, both Alpha and Kudos. Well, there are many other cases, and I don't know whether you know that there are there is no provisions in the MID, so there have been a number of voluntary agreements under the scope of the Council of Bureaus. And the Council of Bureaus has done its very, very best, but those agreements do not function at all, and we have these experiences that prove that they don't function. Why? Because they are voluntary. For instance, in the 1995 Convention between guarantee funds, there are some guarantee funds that are not signatories to the agreement because it's a voluntary one. Some others signed the agreement with reservation clauses. For instance, I remember Portugal, a case of reservation clauses, and some signatories signed with no reservation clauses, but afterwards they have withdrawn from the agreement. So it is a key issue to provide a legal framework based on these principles. We totally agree with these principles, the supervisor, regulator, guarantee fund, and the bureau and insurance market. Full compensation should be provided within the quantitative limits of compulsory insurance for both personal and material damages. The same level of protection should be provided as we have in the cases of uninsured and untraced vehicles. No distinctions at all. Each member state should designate a body responsible for insurance compensation. In Spain, it would be the Consorcio, because we are both the MTPL Guarantee Fund and the IGS. Visiting victims and victims on foreign vehicles should be protected by the same instruments that are working nowadays. In the case of compensation bodies and bureaus, all the foreign accidents, cross-border accidents could be tackled in case of insolvencies as well. And this is a very important question. It is the home country control principle. It is the main principle of the directives, and in our view, it should be transferred also to the MID directive. Regardless of which is the body that attends to the victim, that is the guarantee fund, the bureau, or whatever it is, and this body advances compensation, the final burden must be borne by means of reimbursement by the body of the home member state. That is clearly the view of the Spanish industry. Minimum amounts of cover. I am going to be very quick. Our view is that updating the minimum amount and harmonizing the protection of victims could be a very desirable, advisable thing to do once we are modifying the MID in order to reduce the distance between the member states. We are not going to have the same level, we know it, it is very difficult, but at least to reduce this level. In the case of Spain, we have moved from 350,000 euros as a limit of compensation to 70 million in the case of bodily injuries and 15 million euros in the case of property damages per accident, whatever the number of victims. So we have very, I think, very protective limits nowadays. So we also think that no different amounts should be established by type of vehicle. There was a debate, and the European Commission asked the member states, and we think that this system could complicate unnecessarily the whole system of the directive, and the dimension of power of vehicles are not always related to the severity of potential damage. For instance, the cases of passengers of mopeds many times are more vulnerable than a passenger of a car or of a truck. A car can cause chain collisions, and the car can also cause the derailment of a train. So there is no need to think that the main danger is on the truck side or the commercial vehicle side. And to end with, the portability of claims history statements. Well, in our view, this is, perhaps we are mistaken, but I have to say clearly that from the point of view of the whole sector, the whole industry in Spain, this is a second division issue. We think that it is neither necessary nor appropriate to amend the motor insurance directive in this matter. We are not concerned about portability of claims history statements because we think that the principle of market freedom should remain as the main principle, and the pay-as-you-drive principle also diminishes the influence of these statements. And finally, there are different climatic conditions from one country to another. And for instance, in the Spanish case, we have within Spain, we have very different conditions. So a certificate cannot have the same significance in every region of a country, nor in every member state on the European Union. So thank you very much for your attention. I hope that with this speech you may have a clearer idea of what the position of the insurance industry is regarding this process. Thank you very much.